Emily Carter had learned to measure time by hunger. By late afternoon, when the light slanted through the dusty windows of the roadside restaurant, her children's quiet had grown heavier than words. Anna held herself together with a seriousness that didn't belong to 7-year-olds, while Noah's small fingers tugged at Emily's sleeve, a question he no longer asked out loud. Emily smoothed his hair and breathed in, steadying herself before stepping toward the counter. She had practiced the sentence in her mind. Polite. Brief. Unassuming. The kind that didn't invite judgment. "Excuse me," she said, her voice soft but clear. "If there's any food that can't be sold tonight, anything at all, I'd be grateful." Behind the counter stood Mark Reynolds, the manager, tall and impatient, a man whose authority came from a name tag and a habit of being obeyed. He glanced at Emily's worn jacket, at the children hovering behind her, and frowned as if they were a problem he hadn't ordered. "We don't give out free food," he said. "This isn't a shelter." Emily nodded quickly. "I understand." "I just thought wrong," Mark cut in, his eyes flicking to the dining room. A few customers looked up. Emily felt heat rise in her cheeks. She had promised herself she wouldn't cry. She had promised herself she would ask once and leave if the answer was no. Her mind drifted, uninvited, to the life she used to live. Ryan Carter had once laughed easily, had once talked about weekends and savings and the house they'd buy someday. After his promotion, the laughter thinned. He came home late with excuses that smelled like cologne Emily didn't own. When she found the messages, careful words sent after midnight, Ryan didn't deny them. He only said she was imagining things, that stress made her paranoid. The night he stopped coming home, he took his certainty with him and left her with the math of survival. Emily worked mornings at a laundromat, afternoons when she could find them. Bills piled like quiet threats. Pride, once sturdy, had worn down into something brittle. Today, it had finally broken. "Please," Emily said, not to Mark alone but to the room. "My children haven't eaten since this morning." Mark's mouth twisted. "That's not my problem," he said, louder now. "You can't just walk in here and beg." "I'm not begging," Emily replied, though the word had already done its damage. Anna pressed closer, her eyes wide. Noah shifted his weight from foot to foot, sensing danger without understanding it. Mark leaned forward. "You need to leave," he said. "Now." Emily turned to go. She had asked. She would leave. But as she reached for Noah's hand, Mark stepped around the counter and grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her sleeve as if to steer her out faster. The suddenness shocked her into stillness. "Don't touch me," she said, the words trembling but firm. A hush fell over the restaurant. Plates paused halfway to mouths. An elderly woman at the window, Mrs. Helen Foster, Emily would later learn, set down her fork, her eyes narrowing with concern. "I said leave," Mark repeated, his grip tightening. "You're causing a scene." Emily's heart pounded. Scenes were for people who could afford consequences. She wasn't one of them. She tried to pull away, careful not to escalate, careful not to give him a reason to justify what he was already doing. "I'm going," she said. "Please let go." Mark scoffed. "Always the same story," he muttered. "Women like you." The words struck deeper than his hand. "Women like you." The accusation carried a lifetime of assumptions, failure, irresponsibility, moral weakness, each one pressing down on her shoulders. Emily swallowed and stared at the floor, willing herself not to disappear. Outside, the air changed. A low rumble crept through the walls, vibrating the windows. At first, it sounded like distant traffic, easy to ignore. Then it grew louder, closer, a layered growl that turned heads. Mark rolled his eyes. "Great," he said. "Now we've got noise." The door opened, letting in a rush of cool air and the smell of asphalt. 3 men stepped inside, leather jackets creased with use, their movements unhurried. Jake Sullivan entered first, his gaze sweeping the room with quiet attention. Lucas Moore followed, his posture straight, his eyes assessing. Ethan Brooks came last, pausing just long enough to hold the door for someone behind him who wasn't there, a habit learned from another life. They didn't speak at once. They didn't need to. The room had shifted, as if it had inhaled and forgotten to exhale. Jake noticed Emily immediately, the way she stood angled away from Mark, the tension in her shoulders, the children clinging to her like anchors. Lucas noticed Mark's hand on her arm. Ethan noticed Anna's face, pale and trying to be brave. Mark felt it too, though he pretended not to. He released Emily's arm with a sharp motion, as if he'd decided on his own to be reasonable. "We're close to loitering," he said, projecting confidence that rang hollow. "If you're ordering, order. If not," Jake stepped forward just enough to be heard without raising his voice. "Is there a problem here?" Emily looked up. She hadn't expected help. She hadn't allowed herself to hope for it. The question opened something fragile in her chest. Mark laughed, short and dismissive. "No problem," he said. "Just handling a situation." Mrs. Foster cleared her throat. "I saw what happened," she said quietly, but her words carried. "She asked for food. That's all." Jake nodded once, acknowledging the truth without pressing it. His eyes returned to Emily. "Are you okay?" he asked. Emily hesitated. The honest answer was too large for the room. She settled for the simplest one. "I will be," she said. Outside, the motorcycles ticked as they cooled, a steady reminder that something had arrived and wasn't leaving yet. Mark shifted his stance, recalculating. Emily felt the weight of the moment, the sense that the next breath would matter. She tightened her grip on Noah's hand and straightened her shoulders. Whatever came next, she would face it standing.
Morning arrived gently, as if the house itself wished to pretend nothing unusual had occurred. Emily woke before Daniel, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing. The memory of the night lingered, not as a scene replayed, but as a feeling she could not shake. Nothing improper had happened, she reminded herself, yet the reassurance felt thin. Downstairs, Laura was already bustling in the kitchen, humming as she prepared breakfast. Emily joined her, grateful for the normalcy of familiar sounds. Laura chatted easily, recounting plans for the day, unaware of the quiet tension that sat just beneath Emily's calm expression. Daniel joined them soon after, distracted but pleasant, his attention divided between his coffee and his phone. Ethan entered last. He greeted everyone politely, his demeanor unchanged. Yet when his eyes met Emily's, there was a brief pause, acknowledgement without emphasis. He said nothing about the night, and Emily felt both relief and disappointment in that restraint. The day unfolded with small, shared activities. A walk through the nearby park, lunch on the patio, conversation that drifted from light humor to comfortable silence. Daniel took a work call midway through the afternoon and disappeared indoors, leaving Emily outside with Laura and Ethan. Laura spoke animatedly, but it was Ethan who noticed when Emily grew quiet, who adjusted the conversation without calling attention to her withdrawal. It was subtle, the way they began to orbit one another emotionally. No deliberate choices, no conscious intentions, just moments of understanding that formed without effort. Ethan asked Emily about her interests, not out of obligation but curiosity. She answered carefully at first, then more freely, surprised by how long it had been since someone had asked simply to know her. Later, while Laura stepped inside to take a call, Emily and Ethan remained on the patio. The air was warm, the kind that invited honesty. Ethan leaned back slightly, giving her space even as he spoke. "You seem thoughtful," he said. "Not unhappy, just carrying something." Emily hesitated. She had learned to deflect questions like that, to offer vague reassurances. Yet the words came before she could stop them. "Sometimes people grow used to silence," she said, "and forget how loud it feels inside." Ethan did not interrupt. He waited, letting the quiet settle rather than rushing to fill it. "That sounds exhausting," he replied finally. The simplicity of the response struck her. No advice, no judgment, just recognition. Emily laughed softly, a sound edged with sadness. "It is." From that moment, conversation flowed with less effort. They spoke about missed expectations, about how easily time reshaped relationships without asking permission. Emily was careful not to mention Daniel directly, but the absence was implied in every carefully chosen word. As the afternoon faded, Emily felt an unfamiliar pull, a desire to continue the conversation, to linger in this space where she felt understood. The realization unsettled her. She reminded herself of who Ethan was, of the boundaries that mattered, of the marriage she still occupied even if it felt hollow. That evening, Daniel announced he would be working late again, retreating to a quiet corner of the house. Laura excused herself early, tired from the day. Emily found herself alone in the living room, flipping through channels without interest. When Ethan joined her, he kept a respectful distance, sitting at the opposite end of the couch. They talked quietly, careful with their words. Emily spoke about her work, about how fulfillment sometimes slipped through her fingers despite her efforts. Ethan listened, occasionally offering observations that felt thoughtful rather than intrusive. At one point, he stopped himself mid-sentence. "I don't want to cross any lines," he said, his voice steady. "I just want you to know you're not invisible." The statement landed with more weight than any compliment. Emily looked away, emotion tightening her throat. "That's kind of you," she replied, aware that kindness could be dangerous when it arrived at the wrong moment. Later that night, Emily lay awake again, replaying the day in fragments. She recognized the shift within herself, the subtle leaning towards someone who made her feel heard. The knowledge brought guilt, sharp and immediate. She had not touched Ethan, had not spoken words that openly betrayed her marriage, yet something private had already begun to form. The next morning, Emily called her friend Martha during a quiet moment. Martha listened patiently as Emily described her unease without naming its source. When Emily finished, Martha's voice was gentle but firm. "Emotional closeness can be just as complicated as anything physical," she said. "Sometimes more so." Emily ended the call with a heaviness she could not ignore. She watched Ethan from across the room later that day, noticing how careful he remained, how he never sought her out when others were present. His restraint mirrored her own growing conflict. Before they left Laura's house, Ethan approached Emily briefly in the hallway. "I enjoy talking with you," he said simply, "but I respect your life as it is." She nodded, grateful and unsettled all at once. "I do too." As Emily and Daniel drove away, the distance between them felt unchanged, yet Emily herself felt altered. She understood now that the most fragile boundaries were not physical at all, but emotional, crossed quietly without witnesses, and as the road stretched ahead, Emily wondered whether recognizing the line was enough to keep her from stepping further, or whether awareness only made the temptation harder to resist. The house felt different after they returned home, as though the walls had absorbed the distance Emily now noticed more clearly. Daniel moved through rooms with the same distracted efficiency, unpacking, checking messages, resuming routines without pause. Emily watched him, aware that nothing had changed on the surface, yet everything felt newly fragile. She told herself the unease would fade. Time would smooth it out. But in quiet moments, Ethan's words returned, not as longing, but as a reminder of what attentive presence felt like. Emily did not reach out to him. She avoided even the harmless impulse to check whether he had arrived home safely. Distance, she believed, was the only responsible choice. Daniel sensed the shift before he named it. One evening, as they sat across from each other at dinner, he set his phone aside deliberately. The gesture felt unfamiliar, almost ceremonial. "You've been quiet lately," he said. "More than usual." Emily considered offering a safe answer, something neutral. Instead, she met his eyes. "I think I've been quiet for a long time," she replied. "You're just noticing now." The honesty startled them both. Daniel leaned back, folding his arms, defensive habit rising quickly. "If something's wrong, you should have said something." "I didn't think it mattered," Emily answered. The words came without accusation, which made them heavier. "I didn't think you wanted to hear it." Silence settled between them, thick but necessary. Daniel looked away, jaw tight. "That's not fair," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Maybe not," Emily agreed. "But it's true." That night, sleep did not come easily. Emily lay awake, listening to Daniel breathe, thinking about the choices that had led her here. She recognized now that her loneliness had not begun with Ethan. It had existed long before, unnoticed because it had grown slowly. Days passed. Emily returned to her routines, finding small comfort in structure. She resisted the urge to romanticize the connection she had felt. Instead, she examined it honestly, how it had revealed a need rather than created one. That understanding steadied her, even as it unsettled her. Ethan reached out once, a brief message meant only to wish her well. Emily read it twice before responding with equal brevity. Their exchange remained careful, respectful, contained. The restraint felt like both a relief and a quiet loss. Martha noticed the change when they met for coffee. "You seem clearer," she observed. "I had to be," Emily replied. "I was standing too close to something I didn't want to become." Martha nodded, approving but concerned. "Clarity doesn't erase consequences," she said, "but it helps you choose what comes next." Emily took those words with her. That evening, she asked Daniel to talk. Not to argue, not to assign blame, just to speak honestly. They sat together in the living room, the television dark. Emily spoke first, choosing her words carefully. She told him about the loneliness, the invisibility, the quiet erosion of connection. She did not mention Ethan by name, only the moment of realization that had forced her to confront the truth. Daniel listened, truly listened, for the first time in months. His defenses softened as understanding replaced assumption. "I didn't realize how far we drifted," he said finally. "I thought stability was enough." "It isn't," Emily said. "Not for me." The conversation did not fix everything, but it cracked something open, a space where effort might grow if both of them chose it. Daniel promised presence, not perfection. Emily promised honesty, not silence. Later, alone in their bedroom, Emily felt the weight of her choices settle. She knew repair would take time, and that awareness did not guarantee success. But she also knew she had stepped back before crossing a line she could not uncross. Before sleeping, she sent Ethan a final message, thanking him for his kindness and wishing him peace. His reply was simple, understanding, and final. The closure felt gentle, respectful of what had almost been. As Emily turned off the light, she reflected on how close she had come to mistaking attention for escape. The experience had not given her a new love story, but it had given her clarity, and sometimes clarity was the most difficult gift of all. The future remained uncertain, shaped by choices yet to be tested. But as Emily closed her eyes, she knew one thing with certainty. Being seen had changed her, and whatever came next, she would no longer allow herself to disappear quietly again.